So this is a FOIA forum for November 2025. It's mostly going to be about Flock, or almost exclusively about Flock, as we've said. We've been meaning to do this for a while. We're both going to run you through where all this reporting came from and all that sort of thing, and remind you what this reporting is. Eat ice. That's a really good quote in the chat. I didn't even mean to do that. All right. Can you take us to the next slide, Jason?
Yes. I think I'm going to do it like this because it gives me more control. Like, I'm not going to do the big presentation.
Sure.
Version.
As long as people can see it.
Yeah, I think
so,
you can see this.
Actually, Jason, do you want to tell us about this? Because I think these anonymous researchers, who, as far as I know, still want to remain anonymous, I think they reached out to you first and showed you this request, right?
Yeah, so for those of you who are here for the first time, we are not going to go through the how to file a FOIA in the first place, because we have done 4 or 5 of those sessions, and we usually start with that. I think throughout the process, maybe we'll show you some and talk about them. But for the most part, we're going to talk about our specific Flock reporting and how we did FOIAs there, how other people have done FOIAs about Flock, so on and so forth. As an intro, we have done a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests and state and local requests, which each state has a different law, different public records law, but broadly we just call them FOIAs. And we have done a lot of FOIAs about Flock and about surveillance companies in general. And for people who don't know, FOIAs and public records laws allow you to request government documents, public records, obviously. They don't normally allow you to request information about private companies. We're not getting this information from Flock itself, but we are getting information about how Flock interacts with state and local governments. And if you're interested in this sort of thing, state and local governments are a really good place to start your FOIA journey, because usually they're not getting as many requests. And so if you start out with federal, which you can do, but if you start out with federal, they often have just thousands and thousands of requests. It might take months and months and months. We've actually gotten some Flock records back within a matter of a few days from state and local agencies, because they're getting less requests. Often they're just more willing to work with you. I think I mentioned this before, but my mom was a FOIA, a public information officer for a small town for a long time. And as a kid, a teenager, she would sometimes mention, hey, I got a FOIA request. And she was excited about it and excited to fulfill it, because she didn't get that many. And so local governments are a really good place to start with your FOIA requests. We had done a lot of reporting about Flock, the automated license plate reader company. And in most of our articles, we have hey, do you know more about this? Please reach out to us on Signal or wherever, or email. And in this case, we had, as Joseph mentioned, an anonymous researcher who didn't want to have their name attached to it, file a Freedom of Information Act request with a few different local police in Illinois. And they wanted to pass the documents to us so we could report on them. So this is kind of a dream for us, where someone else had the foresight to file a public records request, already got interesting documents back, and just wanted us to do the additional reporting. There was actually a ton of additional reporting on this story before we got it to publish, but this is the initial request. Joseph, do you want to talk a little bit about what the documents are and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I assume everybody knows this, but for those who don't, or you need a refresher, Flock runs automatic license plate reader cameras all across the United States. I sometimes call them AI-enabled cameras, because they can also actually detect people in some ways, where you can search for, give me all examples of a person in a green hoodie that's passed the security cameras or whatever. So they do these. And they also allow a ton of sharing between different agencies. So let's just say hypothetically that you are an agency with cameras in a local town in Texas, and you've set up Flock cameras as the police department. Maybe an organization in California can actually search those cameras across the country in another state for specific license plates, which are specific vehicles, and by extension, a specific person essentially in their movements as well, if you know who happens to be driving that car or you want to find out who's driving that car. So you have all of these agencies all over the country tapping into each other's cameras as part of this nationwide lookup tool. There's a statewide lookup tool, obviously per state, then the nationwide one, and for a police agency to get involved in that, they also have to provide access to their cameras. For our reporting that we'll get into, pretty sure lots of police agencies did not understand really what they were signing up for, and I think lots were shocked over the coming weeks and months after our reporting that, oh God, our cameras are available and those potentially illegal. And Jason, I'll send you the Google Doc in a sec, just in case you see questions as well, or maybe I'll do it. But so when cops are using the system to do lookups, there's an audit trail, which is a good thing, right? You want police officers you want them to create a record of how they're using a particular surveillance technology to protect against abuse, obviously, right? And various other purposes. And what this researcher found, and I think other researchers found it in parallel as well, but this researcher that we spoke to, they found it specifically called a network audit, like capital N, capital A, proper noun. This is a really specific type of document that police agencies will have. So this researcher requested the organization audit, which you see at the top of the request, which is what organizations are you sharing data with, but then also specifically the network audit. And as they say, the report should include data logged from the period of June 1st, 2024 to the date this request is processed per FLOC's documentation. The network audit is found, blah, 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 blah. Two things there, well, three things. A specific type of document, network audit. This is very similar to when I request a statement of work from ICE or CBP or something like that. That is a very particular type of document. They're going to know what you're talking about. They deal with this all of the time. That's the first thing. The second one in this request is the specific date, June 1st, 2024 to the date this is processed. If you don't put dates in, broadly speaking, you might have some issues with your requests. They're going to say, oh, you're requesting all documents forever in the history of the universe, essentially. We're not going to give you that because that's a massive pain in the ass. So you have to give a date, at least most of the time. And then the rest of it is like some helpful information, which maybe the police officer or FOIA officer already knows this, maybe they don't, but it says you should be able to find it in this location. So I think this was a fantastically crafted FOIA request, public records request, specific, tailored, narrow, surgical, but it got some very, very interesting information as well. Next question? Slide. Yeah, go for it. So, yeah, okay. So this is what the data comes back, what it actually looks like. Now, this has been filtered a little bit by the researcher. Usually it's just a massive spreadsheet, I think of several hundred megabytes, which isn't the biggest file size in the world, but that's a massive spreadsheet, obviously, right?
I was actually looking yesterday, and there's like for 15 days, like a network audit of 15 days, there was 168,000 requests back in May. And that was like, from not this FOIA, a different similar FOIA, but there was between 120 and 160,000 requests in 15 days. So that many rows. Yeah. So the researcher gave us the response that they got. And I think this was from Danville Police Department. If I remember correctly, they'd done public records requests to a bunch of police agencies. And then this sort of work, I think it was Danville, Illinois, if I'm remembering correctly, not California. Although did send a request to California as well. So they do that. They give us the raw stuff, but they also did something very, very helpful, which was they went through the reason column in that spreadsheet, which is the most interesting one, because that is what cops are putting down as their reason for querying the FLOC network. And, people
I mean, there are other sort of organizations or groups that track the location of flock cameras, maybe the number of flock cameras in an area. This was about usage, and we had never seen that before. Flock often says its tools are used to find missing people, missing vehicles, stop petty crime, that sort of thing, serious crime as well. And I believe that's all true. I don't think they're lying about that whatsoever. I do think the technology does have a utility for combating those sorts of crimes. But here, as the researcher found, and we corroborated, you look at that reason tab, it says ICE, it says HSI, it says immigration. And obviously, that is incredibly significant in the second Trump administration with his mass deportation campaign. But also, frankly, it's hugely significant still in the previous Biden administration or the Trump administration before that as well, right? So this is what the researcher found. And for the first time, it was showing us not only what cops were using it for, but they were doing local lookups for ICE. Yeah. Should we carry on?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about this. This is the story that resulted from this spreadsheet. I want to talk a little bit about how we went from spreadsheet to story, which was, as Joseph mentioned, we went through this information. We reached out to all of these police departments that had run the searches and asked them, like, hey, we have these public records, like, what's up with this? And a lot of them were at the time saying, well, this is with HSI, which is Homeland Security Investigations. And their argument was, well, HSI does a lot of like child trafficking, drug trafficking research, things like that. But very interestingly and terrifyingly, under the Trump administration, HSI has really like changed its remit a bit and is doing more standard immigration enforcement. And then they also do workplace enforcement, workplace raids. You may have heard of one like at the Hyundai battery factory in Georgia, I believe. And it's like this is all part of the Trump administration's mass deportation effort. One thing that was really interesting to us is that a lot of the police departments that were listed on here as being part of the lookup, such as Danville, for example, or like other departments in Illinois that had their records searched, said, well, we don't do immigration enforcement. We're not allowed to do immigration enforcement as part of a state law in Illinois, where it's essentially like a sanctuary state. Where local police cannot do immigration enforcement according to state law. And so they were like, this is impossible. This couldn't have happened. And in multiple cases, I had to explain to the cops what this data was and what it was showing. Joseph sort of mentioned earlier, like, it's kind of interesting that a lot of cops are opting their own cameras in their own cities into this nationwide network, and they don't fully understand, or at least maybe they do now, but at the time they didn't understand that meant that police in Dallas could search it, that police in South Carolina could search it, like all that sort of thing. And it turned out that they were all violating Illinois law. And so, there was just like a lot of additional reporting in this story, a lot of talking to police departments, talking to civil liberties experts, talking to legal experts in Illinois about sort of, what was going on here. So we published this story, and then I will toss it back to you.
Yeah, I'll just answer a couple of questions. Jason, interrupt me if you've already done these, but I don't think you did. One was, have you seen anything in the documents you've gotten indicating that Flock is operating in Canada? I haven't, but I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if they do that eventually or not already. I would definitely search around, even do some Google Docs for site:/.ca for Canadian domains, file type : PDF, then put in quote marks, Flock safety. Maybe you'll get a Canadian procurement record or something like that showing that they bought it, or do something similar to that. Another question, do they contract with the state or local officials? Who is actually setting up the cameras and picking out their locations? that would probably determine where I ask my questions and requests. It's both. They sell cameras to cities and they sell cameras to police departments. They also sell cameras to homeowners associations and individual neighborhoods. Now, the HOA stuff, that's not really part of national lookup, as far as I know. Well, there's different data sharing going on there, as far as I can remember. But the police one, that's much clearer. These are our cameras and we're putting them to the network, blah, blah, blah. I might be a little bit wrong on that from what I can remember, but they sell it to everybody, and then the city often chooses where to put them. Oh, hey, this is a really busy intersection. We're going to put the cameras there. And then one from Brendan. Were cops also doing non-local lookups, such as an Illinois cop looking to Indiana or even faraway states? Absolutely, and we'll get to that. Yeah. So this is a request I wrote, and you'll see I filed it the day after we published that story about ICE, and also the language is exactly the same as the one from the anonymous researchers, because frankly, this is what you should do with public records and FOIA requests. If you come across a request which you think is interesting and fruitful, and you could apply it to your own agencies or your own circumstances, absolutely take it, adapt it, tweak it, or even copy it. You know, people copy my requests all the time, especially when getting contracts out of ICE. I'm very happy for them to do that. I think this is an important part of FOIA reporting, which is sharing what requests are successful, you know. So I did that. And then if we can go to the next slide, Jason. We got this one back. Now, this is a spreadsheet I received, not the anonymous researchers, but I got this after doing my own FOIA. And the red block there is I redacted out the license plates. Like, I didn't need to publish random people's license plates, you know what I mean? And when you get the records, they're going to vary. Like, some will include the reasons, some won't. And I guess we'll talk about what Flock changed later as well with regards to that. But in that spreadsheet, it says immigration protest. And then next slide, please, Jason. Sorry, go ahead.
Let's talk about redactions real quick, because there's
Yeah.
like many questions about it. So again, each state has a different public records law, and each state has different exemptions to their specific law. Many states have exemptions that say cops can't provide information about active investigations. For example, there's a lot of privacy exemptions, things like this. You sort of need to do research into each state's law to see what they can redact and what they can't. That said, redactions and exemptions are applied like really, how you say, haphazardly and differently by different agencies. And so what you'll see, like, as we go through this, is there have been a lot of different reporters and like civil liberties experts filing similar requests about Flock. And what we've learned is that different police departments are redacting things and others are not redacting like the same things. And because of the way that these network audits work, it is essentially cops going in and downloading searches from like the entire country, because it's a nationwide network. And so we've seen records from like specific police departments in one state where they don't redact anything, and they leave like quite a lot of very sensitive information that probably honestly should be redacted, like information about active investigations and things. And then others will just like redact everything. And I think we've talked about this in other FOIA forums, but one strategy we have is to file a lot of FOIAs, like kind of try to get the same documents from different police departments or different cities, because often police departments and agencies are interacting with each other. Like a lot of email threads that we've seen about Flock will start out with one police department, and then they'll CC in like the city council or the mayor of that same town. And so in some cases you can get documents from the city hall that you can't get from the police, and vice versa, but they ultimately like are the same documents. It sort of just depends on like the FOIA officer that you get. And then you can challenge redactions, you know, that we can talk about that later, but basically you have to appeal the decision, and you have to like you can just say I appeal this decision, but it's better if you have some sort of basis for why you are appealing the decision, and that requires you to kind of like look up what the law is and make an argument about why you believe that they should not redact it. And then the last step is you can file a lawsuit about all of this if you still don't like where it went, and that is like expert level, but it is something that you can do. I will go to the next slide now.
And something we're doing against ICE as well for its $2 million spyware contract, for those who didn't see that. So I get that spreadsheet back, which says immigration protest. I then write this article, California cops investigate immigration protest with AI camera system. I then found, well, while reporting that, I found like a local media report about some cops who they shut down. It was like an immigration protest, and people were driving how they described recklessly in their vehicles. So you put two and two together, and it looks like they used Flock to trace those vehicles. Don't know much more than that, really, but that was the context in which that response came back. And that's always interesting because you can see local media reports about XYZ happened somewhere around the country, and you're scratching your head thinking, well, how did they do that? Well, almost accidentally, we figured out there was Flock, basically. And I think that's going to apply to a lot of things. Let's go to the next one. So, I mean, after the researcher reached out, we published the ICE one. We did our own public records requests. We published articles based on that. There has been a wave of coverage at the state, the regional, and the local level all over the country. It basically, other journalists, after they saw our reporting, they went and emulated it and applied it to their own local communities. And these were just four that we quickly had to hand in Slack. But I think there have been like dozens upon dozens of articles from local communities about this. The impact has been crazy. Local agencies and departments have said they're going to not use Flock anymore in that particular area. Cities have decided to not renew their contracts, all of that sort of thing. Jason just says he'll be right back. But the amount of impact has been really, really crazy. And I think this really, really does show the power of not just public records, but being transparent about journalism. In that, I don't think we initially published the exact language of the FOIA request that we got from the researchers. I think we just said they requested network audits. But again, because that's so specific, that allowed all of these other outlets all across the country to basically do the same thing. And we had journalists reach out asking us for help. And unfortunately, we can't help everybody because there's so much going on. But anything you just want to add on that, Jason? The wave.
Yeah, I mean, this was like a dream scenario, honestly, where, our story then led like to honestly dozens and dozens and dozens of local reporters doing similar things about their, their town, their city, their state. And I think that's nice for us because we sort of started this wave of reporting. But then the other thing is that like local police are going to have specific expertise into what is into what's going on in their town, and it's like I don't frankly know what's happening in Oakland. I don't know what's happening in Oklahoma City, etc. And like a local police are going to know more about that, and so they were able to do that.
Sure. The next one, this was very, very interesting because for weeks, if not a month or two, maybe after we did that reporting, which again, what the spreadsheet showed was local cops were doing lookups for ICE. I think we described it almost as side door access. Well, ICE doesn't have a contract with Flock. We went through procurement databases and there was no contract between ICE and Flock, no contract between Customs and Border Protection and Flock. But what they were doing was, well, we'll do these local lookups via local cops and they'll provide us the information. A local outlet elsewhere in the country got a network audit back and I believe an organizational audit as well. And they found something very interesting, which was that, it looks like DHS, and I think it was Customs and Border Protection at first, it looks like Customs and Border Protection were doing lookups themselves, which would obviously indicate that it wasn't local cops doing it. The DHS somehow had direct access to this national surveillance database. That's very, very interesting. The outlet, I think they reached out to Flock for comment, and Flock was like, no, we don't do this, you're wrong, etc., etc. And then eventually they admitted it to the outlet and said, actually, we have a pilot program with DHS, and they do have direct access to the platform. I'll say that, I've spoken to sources with knowledge of that situation, I'll say, and they described it as basically, essentially, everybody was lied to inside the company, whereas like nobody really knew about that except the top brass, basically. So they were misled that no, we don't have a DHS pilot or whatever, and then it turned out they did, and there was this massive miscommunication, and they had to correct it, and the outlet went out and reported that. So that's that one on the left with that YouTube video. The one on the right is a few months later, and I think Jason maybe just had to go do the dog, so I'm just going to riff on the screenshot that was there. Let me see if I can actually find the article and then put it into the chat. ICE Navy. So it's this one that I'm talking about, and this came a while later. So this is October. We actually only published this last month, whereas all of this stuff was happening in the summer. And it says that ICE, Secret Service, the Navy, they all had access to Flock's nationwide network of cameras. And the reason we figured this out wasn't actually through FOIAs or public records requests or anything like that. It actually came from the office of Senator Ron Wyden. And if you read the site, and of course you do because you're subscribers or you listen to the podcast or whatever, you'll know that often our stories do come from the office of Senator Ron Wyden. I'll be investigating something. They happen to be investigating something at the same time. They'll find something interesting and then publish about it, and then I'll pick it up, etc., etc., etc. That happens all the time, and journalists do it with different lawmakers or organizations or whatever. But here it was a letter that Wyden published, and it was including more details about, yes, this agency actually had direct access as well. I'm just going to bring up the rest of my slides. Maybe I can screen share them. Give me 1 second. Go here. 1 sec. Share screen. FOIA Forum Flock. Yep. Okay, great. So it looks like you can see my slides. Let me just see, Maggie, maybe you'll get... Is there a specific way you want us to share these records requests with you if we get them? You can absolutely just email them to us. I'm Joseph at FOIAForMedia.co. Jason is Jason at FOIAForMedia.co. That's usually the best. If you are concerned for whatever reason, you can use Signal. It's just when you're sending spreadsheets and PDFs and all of that sort of thing, is usually going to be better if we end up doing email or something similar to that. Hey Jason, I've started sharing my screen, so I'll do it on my end. It's all good.
Okay. All of our power just went out, so I'm tethered to.
Oh my god. I'm sorry.
My laptop. I'm really sorry, everyone.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So I'm actually just on the slide now where things shifted to this other request, and it's about the password reuse. If you can see it, do you just want to talk about what happened there?
Yeah. So I believe this was in Washington, and this was a case where I filed FOIAs based on a tip that we got with a local police officer there, or a local government office there. It was not the police. It was just like the city. And what we learned was they were doing Okay, I'm talking about the wrong story because this happened twice. This happened two times.
Yeah, it's okay. So sorry.
This happened. So it.
I think your audio may have just dropped out, Jason. I'm so sorry. There we go. We're back. A little jumpy. No. How about...
It's gonna be stable in 1 second. I'm sorry, everyone. This is not normal. Okay. I have a wired internet connection. So there's two things. If you drop out again,
Jason, I'll just carry on. But yes, you go ahead.
Okay. One, in Washington State, there was a network of cops who were doing surveillance for each other, which was a FOIA that we did, where basically like ICE would tell them to look up a specific license plate and they would do it, and then they would share information about it over email, which is not exactly what you would want to be happening. And then there was like a network of different intelligence officers for different local police departments who were talking about how, I'm really good at Flock. We have access to some other system. If you need a Flock lookup, like talk to us. If you want to do a social media monitoring thing, like we will talk to you. And that was a series of like really insane emails that we got that also came out of our Flock reporting. This specific case was another FOIA where this is actually one of the police departments in Illinois that I reached out to and said like, hey, you're doing these lookups for ICE, which are against the law. That seems bad. And they were like, well, no, we don't do that. It's against the law. This is not the sort of thing that we do. So after our article came out, they did an investigation into what happened here. And a very smart local publication FOIA'd that investigation, and we separately FOIA'd a different part of the story where we sort of FOIA'd like what was this case and why was this happening. And so kind of around the same time, we both got documents about this. And what happened was they had a local police officer who was assigned to this human trafficking unit, which was a mix of various police departments and federal agencies. And the federal agencies would just say like, hey, we don't have access to Flock because we don't have a contract with Flock. Can you just do these lookups for me? And that's what happened. And so this story was basically like all of the details about that. This image that you see here is their text threads that came back on the FOIA, where even after they got caught, the federal agent was saying, what's the new password for Flock? Because they were just sharing the password to the federal agent. And then you can see, he says, sorry, man, keys had to be taken away. He got in trouble. Barely a slap on the wrist, honestly, because no one got fired in this case, which is maybe not surprising, but that's what happened.
Yes. Yeah, that's what happened. So that was an interesting one because it was two different media outlets doing basically two different parts of the FOIA, right? So then we move on to sort of the abortion stuff. So the ICE stuff, that's all happened and it's ongoing somewhat, but that was the main thing. Then there was this sort of second avenue of reporting, which is that a few days after we reported the ICE stuff, Rose Terse, who's a Muckrock user, muckrock.com is a platform we use to file public records requests. Definitely go check it out if you're going to file your own requests as well. Free to make an account. You have to pay money to eventually file like X amount per month or whatever, but definitely go check it out. You'll see the request here, and again, there'll be YouTube if you need to take a screenshot or anything like that, and we'll probably upload the slides on a paywalled article or something like that. But it's very much the same. It's asking for the organization audit, the network audit. It then asks for a list of network share settings, which is just some other stuff, basically. Very, very similar. And essentially the same data comes back, which is that, it's the reason. It's actually the license plate there. Or is that the license plate? I'm not sure what that is exactly. And then the officer and the agency and that sort of thing. What's interesting here, this is a search in, I believe, was it California, Jason? So the officer was in Texas. Where was the search?
This
Well, the
was
search
California. The search was everywhere, but this was a FOIA. No, this is a Washington State FOIA.
Okay.
Yeah.
There have been so many FOIAs over the past few months. It does get genuinely confusing what's what, but the article, you're doing it at the time, so it's all accurate. So obviously, the reason here is very, very interesting. Had an abortion, search for female. I mean, that is on the face of it, the situation that people have been warning about for years, which is that this technology or other surveillance technology will be turned around to hunt people who are trying to have an abortion, right? Especially after Roe v. Wade's, throwing that out, etc., all of that sort of stuff. And we've done tons of stuff about location data and abortions as well. So then we wrote this one. A Texas cop searched license plate cameras nationwide for a woman who got an abortion. I think very, very significant. We did speak to the sheriff who told Jason, hey, this woman self-administered an abortion. The family was worried for her safety, worried that she was going to bleed out. So that's why we used Flock. Flock got hit, I think, in Denver, but Flock wasn't ultimately the reason she was eventually found safe and sound, apparently. But Flock was using that sort of thing. Then Flock comes out. I'm not going to read this whole thing. You can go see it on Flock's website if you want. But basically calling our reporting clickbait, all of that sort of thing, saying that misleading reporting and all of this stuff, you can go check it out. But months later, the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they get these other records which provide more context on what happened. Jason, do you want to tell us what those records said and how did EFF get those?
Yeah, I mean, they also did a public records request, and it was very, very smart of them. And I think that there's a lot more opportunity to do things like this moving forward. But basically, as you showed in slide 12, where it was just a single entry about this abortion search, we wrote an article about that. It was a very good article. The EFF then went and requested investigative records from that search, and they got back the initial police report about it. And as Josh said here in the chat, not a single thing the cop said was true. That is essentially the case. I mean, they sort of said that they were doing this for the woman's safety. It turned out that it was actually a death investigation, and they had sought to charge her with a crime. So it was like an incredibly concerning story. And then also, Flock had, as Joseph mentioned, like come out against us and the EFF, and the documents that the cops made showed that the narrative that we reported actually initially wasn't even the whole of it. It was much worse than that. The specifics of it were much worse than that. But that's an example of how you can start with like what I call a spreadsheet FOIA, where it's like, oh, you just get like this single cell of data back. And then you can file an additional FOIA on top of that to kind of like drill down into what that specific investigation was about. In this case, the investigation had been closed, sort of, because they had started, essentially the woman's partner had abused her. And so the initial investigation into her had been closed, making these documents available to the public. And then there was like a separate investigation into him that is now proceeding in a court case. And so, another thing and something that I've been meaning to do is going and pulling the court records from that court proceeding against him, which is not FOIA. It's court record reporting where you have to call up the city clerk and things like that. But there is like a lot to be done with these audit reports where you can look at like individual investigations that seem very sketchy, and you can request more information about them.
Yeah. And that previous slide, that was the article that came out eventually. And I do think that's really interesting in that take a step back. It starts with that public records request from Rose, which finds there's the abortion one, the spreadsheet one. We take that. Another public records request from EFF gets that, provides not just like color, but the complete narrative of what actually happened. And I think that's an amazing example of what is possible with public records if you're really, really smart about it. And I didn't even think, oh, well, that was that abortion case. Maybe we should try to get the police report. And it's obvious when you say it out loud, but I will admit that like I often get tunnel visioned or forgetful on like what to actually file FOIA wise. Like I just do contracts with ICE because that's all I'm doing right now, and then I forget. Oh, there's really good shit like this. Yeah.
Well, I think this is one of the things where like local reporters and specialists really come in handy because, of course, we care very deeply about Flock in this line of reporting, but this is a company that is now operating in something like 8,000 cities around the country. And so we can't have our eyes across every single one. Again, it's like there are hundreds of thousands of lookups done every month by local police. And so drilling down into specific ones is really hard. But if you are a reporter who's focused on a specific area or a specific type of thing, then, that really goes a long way. And that's like one of the really helpful things about this line of reporting is that it has been something where we've done some reporting and then experts and local outlets have really picked up the slack. We don't need to talk about it now, but it's like that's why local reporting is so important and why local newspapers and local journalists are so important, because they have that context to do that sort of drilling down that we can't always do.
Yeah, so that's mostly what we wanted to talk about. We'll probably be close to the hour on this one. Usually we go over, but I'll say one more thing and ask what Jason thinks, and then maybe we'll take more questions from the chat. But I think there's way more to be FOIA'd, not just with Flock, but with sort of like network audits or their equivalents in general. So one product that I don't think it came out recently, but like it got resurfaced by Flock recently is this natural language searching or processing where, as I sort of mentioned earlier, you can log into Flock, and it's not just the cameras now. They're trying to do this one pane of glass solution, which is like you have Flock, it has all the cameras, but we'll bring in Ring cameras as well. We'll bring in stuff from this area. We'll bring in all of this different stuff, and a police officer can see all of this information at once. Cops love that, and companies are trying to do that. Flock had a massive falling out with Axon, which is also trying to do that, blah, blah, blah. So a police officer can log into Flock and they can type in, show me all footage of somebody in a green hoodie and orange pants, for example. And it will bring that up. Crucially, I found on the website that all of those searches are audited as well, very much in the same way that there's a network audit. Now, I didn't find, if I remember, a specific sort of name for that document, but I did a request to an agency that I believe was using natural language searches, and then I look at that and I realized, well, maybe I can get those as well. So I send a FOIA request to this police agency. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. And they said, we have found responsive records, which means, they did find the searches they had performed in Flock with natural language, green hoodie or whatever. They then declined to release those. I believe I've appealed, and I think they also said, no, get lost, basically. But there is definitely stuff to do there. If anybody in the chat or watching does manage to do that FOIA, please let us know. And please send over the records. I'm definitely going to do that with other agencies. Just haven't got around to it because we're kind of doing a bunch of other FOIA stuff at the moment as well.
Yeah, in terms of things that I think can still be FOIA'd, I think that these audit logs, like it's very interesting because there was a wave of people filing requests for these audit logs from their local police departments, and that has kind of become the de facto go-to for Flock FOIAs. And I don't begrudge that in any way. It's like a very smart FOIA to do, But for the most part, the documents that come back from that are like very similar. And they're similar across police departments just because of the ways that that they work. Like they're often national lookups. I think kind of your standard traditional FOIA where you're seeking emails between the company and local police department and also internal guidelines for using Flock is something that I want to do more of, especially because all of this reporting has gotten local police and local politicians re-examining their relationships with Flock and how they are using it. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to see like our police departments freaking out. You know, especially in a state like Illinois, where the Secretary of State there found that the cops were breaking the law. You know, what was the fallout of that? And I think that there is a lot of more reporting to be done there. I think that there's a lot of potential public records requests that can be filed where it's like, what is the police chief telling the person who runs their Flock system? What are the local politicians telling the police? Like, what is the Secretary of State telling the people who broke the law? Like, I think that there's a lot more FOIAs that can be done in that vein.
Yeah, and maybe you have it in Slack, Jason, but I'm going to try and remember off the top of my head that a couple of weeks ago, Flock published a blog post. There was more for its customers being like, hey, you're getting a lot of public records requests about your audit logs, your network audits. If you would like to more easily omit the reasons column, we have built a product to do this. So now, after this wave of public records requests across the country, Flock has actively developed a product to make it easier for the cops to not provide that information, which is very interesting. It's a very, very interesting approach that, on one hand, the company strives to be transparent and auditable, but then when more people and members of the public get copies of those audits, that then suddenly becomes a problem where they have to curtail it with some sort of new development in their product. That's pretty interesting. As for the other impact, it's like, as Jason was mentioning, especially California and Illinois, because of our reporting, Flock has removed California from the national lookup tool, Illinois, I think Vermont and Oregon. Maybe I'm wrong on those last two, but it's like 4 states, something like that. So that's a radical change to the products, and I think they're doing more training for cops to actually understand what they're doing here. Yeah, there were a couple of questions, some a little bit earlier on, that I'll try to answer really quick. You go ahead. What were you saying?
Just very quickly. Also, it should be noted that Flock is pushing like new products all the time. They have a drone as first responder program now, and that is a program that we have written about previously, not Flock's version of it, but what cops call drone as first responder is where they are autonomous drones that essentially respond to 911 calls. Sometimes they're deployed in other fashions, but basically like they're autonomous drones that when someone calls 911, they go and fly out there. And Flock has like added this to their system. They also have a ShotSpotter-esque chain of microphones that are supposed to detect gunshots. And then Just has done a lot of reporting kind of separate from the FOIAs based on, leaked Flock materials and things like that about them wanting to add different sources of information to their networks and things like that. So, I mean, the license plate reading stuff is still the core of their business. It's still extremely important, but it is interesting that this company is expanding very rapidly and primarily with the intention of working more closely with police. And so it would be interesting to see like what sort of FOIAs come out about like pitch decks and like what they're proposing to do and things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, schools. I mean, there's tons of schools. They're marketing themselves really heavily to schools and malls. They still sell to homeowners associations. It's like actually not that clear to me how the homeowners association ALPRs interact with law enforcement these days. It used to be something like the company has changed kind of dramatically over the last few years. And so, I mean, there's still a lot to do here.
Yeah, and you can FOIA a school, right? Like a public school. can you do that?
You can FOIA a school district. You can sometimes FOIA individual schools, although usually it's like you FOIA the school district and then they filter that down to the specific school that you're searching for. But yes, you can.
Yeah. Just a few of the questions, like the HOA one. How can we search private flock cameras in retail locks or HOAs to see who they share data with? They don't come up with in LE share lists, but I'm incredulous it isn't happening. Obviously, as you say, you can't FOIA a target or something like that, but maybe they'll be like, if you FOIA the local city government, maybe Target or whoever had to provide a list in response to a request from the city. Obviously, that's quite speculative, but something like that. You want to try to narrow down where that private company has interacted with the government in some form and try to insert yourself in that communication via a public records request, basically. Do we know if Flock provides or is tied into non-police parking enforcement, the little vehicles that scan license plate for parking violations? Not Flock specifically, but Vigilant, another automatic license plate reader company that we covered recently because they have a partnership with Reuters. They put cameras inside repo men vehicles. So whenever repo men are driving around the country, they're like mobile automatic license plate reader cameras. Flock don't know, but we did report, as Jason alluded to, that they want to partner with a dash cam company. Don't know if that's going ahead. We reported it. Haven't really heard much since, but that was pretty interesting. Another question. I've noticed that the reasons departments typically put down are extremely vague. I get that sometimes they need to be for ongoing investigations. How can we push back on this to make sure they aren't doing this intentionally? This is specifically something that Senator Wyden brought up. And I think Flock has now told its customers, you got to put a case number in or something. Right, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, that's...
a crime. That's not good enough.
I mean, a lot of them have nothing in there at all. And so that's very concerning. I think we haven't written this story yet, but that's something that I wanted to write because the tricky thing is, again, a lot of these audit reports have hundreds of thousands of rows, and data sets of this size are pretty difficult to work with, especially because the data is formatted in a usable way, but doing like actual data analysis on it is kind of difficult. I mean, it's not my expertise for sure, but it would be very interesting to look like at the specific ratio of what this is being used for. I've also seen some of the like reason tabs being for just like very like like didn't like the way person looked at me vibes, like the things that you wouldn't want the cops to be using this for. And then there's also another tab that I've seen in some of the audit reports that aren't there in all of them because a lot of them end up redacted, but you can sometimes see the natural language processing, which I think you mentioned, Joseph, but that may have been when my power went out, where it's like, show me all white SUVs in Texas. And it's like, those are really overbroad searches. Those are really concerning, where it's not just a license plate, but they're looking for like specific objects or specific like types of things.
Again, the request I mentioned was looking, yes, for more of those. And I'm really hoping to eventually get like searches they're looking for people. Because we don't really bring this up in much coverage because it's just not a focus of the reporting. And to be clear, Flock says it does not have facial recognition. It says it doesn't do that. Of course, maybe that changes in the future, right? But they definitely detect people in that it's like, show me all people who are wearing a white t-shirt or whatever. And like, that's obviously scanning people. So that would probably be a focus of some coverage in the future. And then there's another one here, which is, did you all have any stories on the Flock Axon breakup? I don't think we do. No, we don't. But go check out Tom Fox Brewster at Forbes, who I believe has covered it. And if you want more reading, check out Tom's interview with the CEO of Flock, where Tom asked the CEO directly about our reporting. It's a good video.
There's a discussion in the chat right now about FOIAing schools, and I know we mentioned this, but I've seen some flock FOIAs for schools and school districts on Muckrock, which you can go look at if you want. Muckrock.com. I always say muckrock.org, but it's muckrock.com.
Pretty sure it's calm, yeah.
Yeah, and you can search there for flock, and you'll see some for school districts. But also, it's like because of school shootings, there's so many surveillance companies that sell to schools now. Sell like they claim that they can prevent shootings and help police respond to them and things like that. There's a huge need to FOIA what these surveillance companies are telling schools. We've done a few stories about this, but like there was a story a few weeks ago about a Doritos chip bag being detected as a gun by one of these like AI vision things. And it's just like, it's an area where there's just so many random companies doing it. And when we were back at Motherboard, we did something, I believe it was about the company Evolve, but it was in one of those AI scanners. And I mean, some of the documents we got back were insane. And Aaron Gordon, one of our old colleagues, did a really good article about that. But I think school surveillance, broadly speaking, outside of Flock, is a very good area for FOIAs.
Yeah. Maybe let's just take a couple more questions, then we'll wrap it up. If I were to file a FOIA request against my local government for Flock info, how would I get started? I would say, well, in the slides, I will go back in time. Let me go. If you're going to try and get it, and again, this is going to be on YouTube, so you take a screenshot now or just watch the YouTube when we upload it in a couple of days, and you can see all of these slides. It won't be a problem. If you want the network audit, you literally copy this, and then you see what comes back. If you are looking for emails between the agency and Flock, you would do something like all emails received by your agency from emails with the domain quote at flocksafety.com, end quote, from 1st of January 2025 to the present. Please include attachments. And then you do the same for sent. And maybe you don't need to get that specific, but emails, you can't do like a blanket approach, because they'll be like, you want all of our emails? Like, that's insane. We're not giving them to you. You have to be so tailored. And they may even ask for, we're not searching the whole agency for this. You need to give us the name of a specific person. And that's when you have to do some research. You have to go on the local government's website and figure out who would be the point of contact, the POC, for this government, this state body, to talk to Flock. And you'd have to narrow that down. A lot of, yes, flocksafety.com is their website. So I usually ask for emails that use that domain. And it's kind of like what this what this request is doing, where it's like, hey, if you need help locating the networks audit, here's how you would go find it. I'm telling them this is the domain of Flock Safety. You just have to search your email records for this domain, basically, and you will get the records. So you really try to tailor it and narrow it down that way.
There's a good question here from Jen where it says, is it realistic to FOIA a police department for closed cases that made use of Flock? How broad/specific would that need to be? I think that's actually a really good idea to try. I don't know how much success that you will have, but my advice would be to severely time limited, like at least to start. And so, I mean, you could say like releasable case records or like releasable like police reports in which Flock ALPR is mentioned or in which Flock was used, something like that. And then I would probably start with like a specific month, so like for the month of March or something like that. And I would probably try one that was a few months ago, just because you are only going to probably get records for closed cases. And then if you're successful, you can expand out beyond that. I would also say, I know people are interested in their local communities, and that's very important. But again, success rates vary wildly based on which police department you get, which FOIA officer you get. Like, try it for 10 towns that are near you, something like that. And just make it the same request, but try it for different places, and it may work.
I just had a question here. I'm going to try. Wow, whoa, look at that feature.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, so I guess you can't do that because you're
I
the
didn't
guest.
know that. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
just a guest.
It also doesn't show the whole question. Fuck. What do you do when the org responds, there's no responsive docs, we have proof a document exists? So I brought this up because we wanted to talk about appeals briefly. As Jason said, you can just reply and say, hey, I'm appealing. But I had one recently where NOAA, that agency, what's it, aerospace or whatever?
No.
Yeah, that's it. I found a contract of theirs in a procurement database. I did a FOIA, and they were like, we don't have any records of this. So like, I'm appealing it because here is a link to the procurement database saying that this contract exists. Now, I don't know whether they're going to actually turn it over. Maybe the record got destroyed. But you do appeal, and you just try to appeal with as much specificity as you can. And like, if you can provide additional evidence, point to stuff online, like, here's some testimony from a city council meeting where this person said that this record exists, then I think you're going to have more success that way. But always appeal. Always appeal, even if it takes you 5 seconds, you say you're appealing it, you might actually get the records. Yeah. Any questions from you, Jason, or should I scroll? There's a couple more. Maybe we just do another few minutes of that. Let's do this one. I could have missed this, but is there a directory of municipalities have contracted with Flock? I don't think so. I don't think there's any sort of centralized thing like that. You would probably go to a website like, is it deflocked.com, Jason? Deflock, yeah. Or Google deflock. Oh, deflock.me. There we go.
The Flock has like its own kind of portal of some sort that
Right.
has information, but it's pretty, the transparency sites. Not everyone has it though, so yeah, it's pretty difficult. That's actually like I talk to a lot of privacy experts for these stories, like, hey, can you contextualize this? Can you contextualize that? And that's something I actually hear about from them a lot, where it's like extremely not clear how many cities Flock is in. They sort of say like 8,000 is what I hear. That said, it's probably less than that because...
Well, they say 8,000 communities. Communities is a vague term.
Right. Because it could include different homeowners associations. It could include like multiple places in a single city. Like it's a big mystery. I mean, it's thousands. It's definitely thousands, but we don't know exactly how many. And it's not, I think the best thing to do is to like keep an eye on your local city council meetings and procurement records and things like that, which, you can often just search on your own city council's website, and you can probably find information about Flock in that way if they do work with it. A lot of cities actually brag that they have Flock cameras at this point.
Yeah. I think just the last question I'll answer is, are there any OPSEC considerations to filing? And I think no, not really. You can file under a pseudonym if you so desire. It just depends on certain states require that, though they only allow requests to be made from a local resident in that state. If you use Muckrock, it will tell you this before you file it, and then they will then use a proxy, as in somebody in the state, to file the request on your behalf. But then some agencies have said we're not going to honour those because we know that you're basically skirting the system. So I don't think there's really any considerations. If anything, at least for me as a journalist, there are actually considerations in the request coming from me sometimes for a couple of reasons. The one is that as a member of the news media, we pay less fees, as in we get put in a special bracket along with educational institutions where we don't have to start paying for a certain number of pages until it crosses over that. So that's good. You can't do that if you are a general member of the public, but if you are a journalist, always say, and I do in every single request, hey, like, I'm a journalist and I'm doing this. You can actually see it here. about halfway down. In order to help determine my status to assess fees, you should know I'm a journalist writing for 404 Media, and that this request is being made as part of news gathering. So I actually used to do it under a fake name for God knows what reason. It was kind of pointless, really. But here I do it under my own name because it's much more beneficial. And of course, if you're physically receiving documents, probably best if you do it under your own name, so you make sure you receive them and that sort of thing. Maybe let's wrap it there, Jason. Anything you want to add about reporting? Or
No, I mean, thank you all so much for coming. As always, the comments and the questions and the conversation in the chat is really, really impressive. Thank you to a lot of you who answered some of the questions that we didn't get to. As always, we'll try to do these a little bit more often. And yeah, if you get any like cool documents and don't know what to do with them, reach out to us. I think the only other thing, sorry for the technical difficulties on my end, that was very poorly timed, but I really appreciate people dealing with me.
You can't stop a power cut.
I don't know if you can see him.
I don't think I can see him, but we're lowering the standing desk. Okay. I can see the top of the dog. The one time. There he is.
He's sleeping now. That's a mango reveal.
Holy shit, man.
And here's a 404 Media College hoodie or crew neck reveal.
Yeah. Only paid subscribers get the dog reveal. Yeah. All right. Thank you all so much. This will be on YouTube. You'll see it soon. We'll email about it. But thank you all so much for subscribing to 404 Media. It allows us to do, obviously, not just stuff like this, but all of the reporting that you just saw, we can only do because the vast majority of our income comes from paying subscribers like you. Jason about to start streaming on Early Pause. That's good. Okay, right. Thank you all so much, and we will see you again next time. Appreciate it.